Well, tonight I have an ambitious challenge to really be able to hit both the pinnacle of Buddhism and the foundational root and let you walk out here with something very practical. And so we'll see if we hit that. One of the things that I've noticed over the years, and has really been a primary motivating force in my own life, has been noting the difference between this sort of intellectual knowledge and wisdom. There's this disparity. We can know a lot of things and go out and do just the opposite. And recently I read this really nice, pithy statement, and it said that, it's a very tangible way to measure wisdom. Wisdom, simply put, wisdom said, I can recognize what's unhealthy and not do it. I can recognize what's healthy and do it. Now apply that to your life. And how many things in our life do we recognize that are healthy and beneficial that I don't do? I'll do that later. How many things do I recognize are not very healthy or the way that I want to be, and I do them anyway? Get upset, get angry, get impatient. I know it's not what I want to do, but I do it. Or habits and tendencies and patterns. When we look at life, we've got New Year's resolutions. This is the start of a year. So we can recognize that there are certain things that we know are beneficial, but I can't do them. And other things I know are not beneficial, but I can't stop doing them. It's a fascinating thing. What is it that prevents me from being the person I want to be? That's simply put. What is it? What is the resistance? And so within Buddhism, they have a very clear answer for this. And essentially, try to keep it that we have habits and tendencies. So people call it karma, kleshas. Kleshas are mental afflictions that are in our mind stream. And karma that propels us to do things, and habits and tendencies that we build up. So on a very natural level, we know that what we do a lot becomes really easy. It's autopilot, right? Learn to drive a car, we have morning routines, we have things that just happen very naturally, and we do it a lot, and it's habit. And so karmically, that's another way of looking at my karmic tendencies. I have certain likes and dislikes, and I reinforce those. This more neuroscientific view is, neurons that fire together wire together. I build those neural pathways. So I have these habits and tendencies, and some are unhealthy, and even though at times I know they're unhealthy, I'll do them anyway. Or a lot of times I don't even notice. I don't even bother to look. I just don't bother to look. And one of the big problems is that we don't bother to look. We don't bother to spend time really even being present in the moment. I quoted a study that came out not too long ago. It said about half the time, on average, the general sort of population in the U.S., about half the time we're not paying attention to what we're doing. I'm not aware of what I'm doing at that time. About half the time. 47% is a technical number, so just under half the time. I don't want to exaggerate. So if you think about that my mind wandering is about 47% of my waking hours. That's a big portion of my time I'm just not even present. And then when I am present, am I engaged in what I'm doing in a clear and healthy way? And of those moments, then how often can I recognize healthy and unhealthy choices? And then of those, how many times can I act on them? This thing shrinks, And so in life, we often get caught up in habits and tendencies. We run a life on autopilot. And basic nature is I want to feel good and I don't want to feel bad. That makes sense. And so I just wake up every day, try to feel good as much as possible, try to avoid feeling bad as much as possible. I do a lot of stuff. And the day comes and the day goes. And somewhere along the line, my mind creates a version of reality that has no bearing in sort of reality. And this gets to the crux of the problem. So ultimately, Buddhism says that our real problem, the root and the ground of all of our suffering, is misperception. It's misunderstanding. It's not seeing things accurately. That's the ground. Out of my misunderstanding, I have a clinging, grasping desire, attachment that's always reaching outside of myself to feel good, and an aversion to things I don't like. So those three sort of root poisons, root delusions. I'll say ignorance, attachment, and aversion. And out of these three is just the generator that creates all the karma and all my kleshas, and it propels me to a lot of suffering in my life and a cycle of suffering. So ultimately, the Buddha said, if you cut the root, if you cut the unknowing, the wisdom, if you see things clearly, you're not going to suffer. He said the natural, will be liberated. That's the whole goal of Buddhism, is to not suffer. It's to find nirvana. It's to become enlightened. And the way we do that is to know ourselves and know the nature of reality. I mean, that's the thing. Sounds like a big task. But there's some very simple things that can help us really get a jump start. And if we start doing some very simple things, we can start seeing clearly. And so today, what I wanted to come to is what we call these sort of 5 recollections. And there are 5 recollections of basically how things actually are. Okay? So in our life, and we just notice, I've been watching people lately, and I just watch suffering. And what I've noted is that I haven't found a time of mental and emotional suffering that didn't arise from anything other than I want things to be different than they are. Okay? I want things to be different than they are. That's why I'm suffering. Now, I'm not saying pain. It's 2 different things, Mental and emotional suffering. I'm being very clear on that. Mental and emotional suffering. Coming from, I want things to be different than they are. And the biggest crux is, I actually think things should be different than they are. This is the problem. I think things should be different than they are. I want them to be different than they are. And my mind has not lived with how things are in so long that when reality shows up, I'm ill-prepared for it. So one of the simple things to do is start recalling how things are, the nature of life itself. And if I remember that, if I call it to mind daily, I'm going to be better prepared for living with the way things are. And automatically, I'm going to reduce suffering. So these 5 recollections. And number 1, this is a whole industry built on trying to avoid this one. I am of the nature to grow old. I cannot avoid aging. Come on, there's a lot of industry around trying to avoid aging, isn't there? Exercise, health, diet, Botox, on and on. And we're going to age and we're going to die. That's the way it is. There's no way to get around that. But how much do we really accept that? And how much do we fight against that? Which is different from being healthy and making good use of the life we do have. The point of these things that are going to pop up, these 5 recollections, you may feel a tinge of unease with them. And that's a good thing. We ask ourselves, what is that resistance to what actually is the nature of things? Because that's the problem. That's where we want to look. Everyone you know is going to come and go, right? We're going to come and go. We're older. And if we recollect this, not only does it help us live in reality, but it reminds us of the value of this day. It reminds us of the value of my interactions with you, with my friends, with the people I don't like. Every single day we have is precious and it will never come again. So as we engage with a more realistic view of knowing that my body's getting older, so I should watch what I eat. because it's getting older. I can't eat the same stuff I used to be able to eat. There's some other things I need to make some adjustments to. Lord knows I cannot lift the weight I used to lift. I got some friends who point that out frequently. So things change. I get old. That's just nice. So if we call it to mind. And the point of calling things to mind is to bring my mind back to truth, because my mind forgets these things. Then it paints other pictures. The second one is I am of the nature to become ill, injured. I cannot avoid illness and injury. Can't avoid it. No matter what. I can get a disease. I can break my leg. I am of that nature. My eyes, sight can go bad. I have a whole list of hospital stays. Laura, she's going into surgery. It's the nature of things. But how many times when that happens, we have an idea that says, why me? Why me? How unfair life is. I see it happen to everybody else. But when it's me, it's unfair. It's not right. It shouldn't be. So, as we bring this up, we just want to catch this mind that says it shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't be like that. It's not fair. That's not right. The idea is if I bring remembrances to life, I start to understand how life is. If I understand how life is, well, now I'm able to respond to it, to engage in it, and to really have skillful means of the days in my life. The resistance of what is going to create these problems. I am of the nature to die. I cannot avoid death. Cannot avoid death. There's 3 points on death that we cover a lot. And one is death is certain. Okay, that's what this is referring to. It's certain. Going to die. I was at when I was a monastic, we were at this Western conference of monastics. And the topic was, climate change and things. And how the environment's changing and we're all going to die and stuff. And, a bunch of monastics sitting around go, yeah, of course we're going to die. Like nobody, yeah, we get that. And the discussion wasn't about that. The discussion was, in this lifetime, is the best use of our lifetime to help prolong, human existence here and do some active engagement and education around that? Or is it better to work on our enlightenment for the benefit of others? So it was kind of that dialogue, because we know that our time's limited. So death is certain, time of death is uncertain. And that is an uncomfortable thing for a lot of people. And also the most empowering, in my own personal life, it's the most empowering thing that I've ever understood, is that I know I could not be here tomorrow. If you know that, it really helps you make the best out of this day. Native Americans like to say, today's a good day to die. It means that they've lived a good life, their relationships are good, they've made good use of their days, that if they were to go, it's okay. Can we say that? Or is there a lot of things left to do? How much time do we waste? How many times do we say, boy, I can't wait for this day to end? Man, that's the wrong attitude. I can wait. And death is certain, time of death is uncertain. And at the time of death, in Buddhism we'd say the only thing that can help you is Dharma. The only thing that can help you is Dharma. Your body's clearly not going to help you. Friends can't help you. All that stuff's going to come and go at the time of death. Whether you're Buddhist, not Buddhist, and I'm going to shoot this, everything that we've done and talked about to a very practical human experience. At the time of death, what's going to matter anyway is how you lived your life, period. Doesn't matter. If I don't believe in an afterlife, at the time of death, what's going to matter is how I lived my life. If I'm Christian, want to go to heaven, it's going to matter a lot how I live my life. If I am Buddhist, it's really going to matter how I lived my life, because all the karma and imprints and trajectory of my habits and tendencies are going to bring me into my next life. It always points down to how I live my life is the most significant thing. I was in a group yesterday, and a gentleman there shared just a simple thing. It doesn't matter what you believe, it matters what you do. That's an interesting point. Obviously, our belief system and faith play a role in our life, but regardless of our belief system, what we do is what's relevant. What we do is what's relevant. And it's always relevant. One of my favorite lessons a long time ago was, faith without actions is superstition. It's a theory. And then there's these great things around Buddhist teachings. My teacher, he'll make a point, and I know this well from my time in monastic life. Is there's some people that get really well trained. They can quote, they can debate, they can talk about enlightenment all day long, but they've never meditated. They've never actually done the things they teach. They can sit up there and tell you all the 9 stages, of meditation, tell you, and they'll refine it. They'll tell you exactly what it looks like in each level, but they haven't actually done it. And you also note that they're still prone to anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration, and the mind's untamed. But we can know this stuff. So this comes back to that point of there's a difference between knowing things, being educated about things, and realizing things, of internalizing things, of being able to put them into practice and cultivate a real wisdom. Again, a wisdom being to actually be able to do that which is meaningful to me and not do the things that are not. Which, as number 4 comes to mind, all that is mine, dear and delightful, will change and vanish. So everything I cherish will change and will vanish. No matter, what I try to do, everything that I cling to will change and vanish. That's just the way it is. Every relationship I have will come and go. And you can see how we really struggle with that one. We really struggle with that one. Because I don't want my relationship to change. I don't want my job to change. I don't want this prized possession that I keep, right here to change, And things change and they vanish, Up here we have my heart gurus. 2 of them are no longer, physically present in our forms. And His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, he's getting treatment right now. 80 years old. And so there's we did prayers for him the other day, and we'll do it. I encourage people to do long life prayers for him as well. But things change, they go. And, who will teach next? That's a whole nother thing. We have this lineage of great masters, of really kind beings who have taken the time and done the work that they've spent, 25 years, some in concentration camps, some in caves, enduring hardships and pain, so that they can achieve a state to really help all of us and to turn the wheel of Dharma for us. And in order to turn the wheel of Dharma, they have achieved some level of realization, so they can teach us and train us and show us the way. And there has to be people to listen. And as things change, many of that generation is transitioning. So if we want the wheel to turn, do we just, think that, that Buddhism stuff, it'll still be there next Wednesday or next whatever. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I go once in a while. And will it still be around? And will it be around in any authentic way with a lineage that has these beings that have been there and done that and tell you directly about it? So there's an urgency, I think, when we take a moment to remember the way things are versus just the way I want them to be. Because I'd sure like them to all be around for a long time. I'd still like... So Geshe Gelsen's, his reincarnation has been identified, and he's a little boy in India. Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. So if we start to realize that these things are impermanent, that things change, the things I cling to, they won't stay the way I want them to, and they're not going to provide me that degree of happiness and stability in my life. They can't. They can't do that. Then we come to number 5, which is I am the owner of my actions. What I do matters. I'm the owner of my actions. And when we speak of actions in a Buddhist context, karma means action. Karma is any movement of the mind. So actions are not limited to what I physically do, but it could be thoughts, my thoughts, movements of the mind, thoughts, as anger arises in my mind, the thoughts and how I think about people is creating karmic imprints. I'm the owner of those. So it says here, I'm the owner of my actions. I am born of my actions. So what I do today is giving birth to how I live in the future. How I've lived in the past has given life to how I live today. What's really wonderful about that is it's totally empowering. It means that I get to change in the way that I find meaningful and healthy and productive. I get to change. Neuroscience has found I can rewire my own brain. I can create new habits, tendencies, new neural pathways. I can, as we know, anything that you start to learn about, you get better at. We had a discussion the other day with Aaron about something that shifts in your mind when you start thinking about, I can't do that versus, let me learn how to do that. Talking about fixing bikes and doing equipment. When we start doing something, we can do it. And if you look at your whole life, everything that you know how to do, you learned. And you learned by practicing, you develop these skills. We can shape the life that we want to live, and we can really make our mind dharma, and we can truly shift the trajectory of our life. But it won't happen on its own. Left unattended, the mind, the elephant in the runt, that delusional mind that tells me stories like I'm going to live for another 20 years, and if I get this right job, I'll have it made, and etc. And if that relationship, I'll have it, it's all good. Left unchecked, that mind takes me further away from reality, and it creates its own habits and its own tendencies. And it does it in a way that takes me further from reality. So we will all change, and the question is, do you want to change consciously or unconsciously? One of the great sort of epiphanies I've had in my own life is that, a lot of people say, like I have these habits I can't change, right? I can't change, I have these habits. I've had that belief. There's certain parts of me that are just hardwired and I can't change. And one of the big epiphanies I've had in reflection was, I do change. Those habits get stronger. It's changing. It's getting stronger. Left unchecked, it's still changing. They're getting stronger and more ingrained. It's not that they're not changing. They are changing. And so we're always changing. Everything is changing. That's the nature of life, is change. And that's what this is talking about. Everything is change. So I'm born of my actions. I am related to my actions. I am supported by my actions. Any thoughts, words, or deeds I do, good or evil, I don't like that translation, skillful or unskillful, wholesome or unwholesome would be better, those I will inherit. So just basic law of karma, cause and effect, that what I think, do, and say has an impact. It has an impact on the life and how I experience the world I live in. And if I recall that, I might be a little more thoughtful about the seeds I want to water in my own life. Because what I think, say, and do today is going to create how I experience the world tomorrow. How I've done it in the past creates it today. And if I start to understand that, it's about me, it's not about you. There's nobody up there punishing me. There's no one out there that is, sitting there in judgment saying, John, I think I'm going to zap you this time because you really messed that up. It just doesn't work that way. I create my problems. I create them by how I engage in life. And I'm also the person that can relieve my suffering. I'm born of my actions. I'm related to my actions. And whatever I do is part of my experience. And so, if we just get this these are what they call the 5 recollections. Imagine every day, that's why they're daily recollections, to bring that to mind. The impermanent nature of this life, and that my actions matter, and this day is not going to come again. And start living in reality. And things shift. You'll notice that when I have mental and emotional suffering, my mind is telling me that things should be different than they are. Every time I say it, I just want to say that's insane. It is absolutely insane. It's just me again yesterday. If somebody tells me things happen for a reason one more time, But what they're saying is like there's some God that's telling them there's a reason and there's some unknown. But just logically, I'll guarantee you there's a reason something happened. Things don't happen without a cause. There's a cause and effect. So when I think that things shouldn't be the way they are, I'm literally insane. Because I'll guarantee you I can find a cause for why it happened. There's a reason things happen. My car gets hit, there's a reason that happened. If I break my leg, there's a reason it happened. I stepped in a hole, I wasn't paying attention, whatever. There's a reason. There's always a reason. Things happen for reasons. But my mind thinks things should be different than they are. I forget there's 7 billion other humans out there who are all trying to be the center of the universe, and they forget that I am. And they get in my way a lot. And this perception, which is very egocentric of how I live my life and how it should be, based on how I would like the world to be and what my judgments are, my values are, and that everyone else should just fall in line, it's not very rational. But we fall in that trap all day long. And we think it should be different than it is. Learning to live in reality immediately removes the resistance to how things are. And as soon as you can do that, guess what you got to do? Improve how things are. If I accept things, then I can improve them. If I resist things, I can't improve them because I'm not even accepting of that they're even happening. I'm spending all my time, energy, and emotional duress on a litany of reasons why things shouldn't be the way they are. And I'm calling my friends, telling them how it shouldn't be that way. And I'll spend years on that. I'll go to therapy, the whole thing on that, how things shouldn't be the way they are. Instead of knowing that this is the way things are and there are reasons for them. But what really matters isn't how things are. It matters is what I do about them. Now I have some power. Because what I do matters. I'm born of my actions. And what I do has an impact. I can, in any situation, cultivate seeds of merit and wisdom, no matter what's happening. Everything that happens in my life is an opportunity for me to cultivate my spiritual path, for me to reduce suffering, and for me to cultivate my highest potentials. That's just everything all the time. None more so and less so than another if I can train my mind properly. And as I've pointed out many times and do frequently, the more challenging and difficult situations in our life tend to be the times we grow the most. I mean, that's not the ones we want, right? And I'm not encouraging you to go out and... There's enough suffering on its own. We don't have to look for it. But those situations are when we dig deep and we think about the meaning of life and make good movement, usually. So if you look at the times in your life that you grew the most, I would venture to guess that most of those came out of suffering. So these 5 recollections are an idea that if I bring my mind to how things are, and I'll just give you an example of, because I got to watch, I've been able to watch my wife Laura the last few days. She's in a lot of physical pain, getting ready for a surgery. Every day, a lot of pain. And every day she gets up and does her best to, be helpful, and we've got a lot of work to do. And now she's at a point before the surgeries that she's not even supposed to take these pain pills that were alleviating the intense pain. So now that's gone, and preparing for this. And so, for example, just getting the insurance, set up, Got insurance, got a doctor, everything's qualified. And, doctor's office call says, hey, they approved the operation with the doctor, but the hospital is out of network. So that's not going to work, So that's odd. So it's kind of a setback, right? Yeah, she rolls with it and says, okay, well, let's see what that's about. Kind of odd that that's not in network, make some calls. I'm going to try to reduce this long story, but essentially it took about 2 or 3 days. Actually, it took more because we went on retreat and came back, of calls where you'd spend all day on the phone with the insurance, and they would tell you something like, no, actually that is in network. And then the next day to find out, no, it's not in network. And then, and hours on a phone. And long story short, through days of this, getting different information at different levels of experts, getting different messages and calling doctors and so forth. Only to find out at the end, it is a network. And, it's all set, right? Now, I got to watch her go through all this and be very patient, and she's trying to do other work, and days get taken up. And a more natural state of being that most humans, I found, would be really upset about this, right? Because what would my mind say? They should have their act together. They should know that this thing is in network or not. I mean, it shouldn't be rocket science, right? And when you finally get that call and the person says, well, yeah, of course it is. We're at the hospital and you make this call. Yeah, we're there and it's all approved. But third, there's this sense of it all worked out. Most human beings, I know, even though they got the right answer at the end, and having spent 3 days, would be in a lot of suffering and angst over, I had to spend 3 days and these idiots didn't know something, right? So for me, it was just a wonderful thing to watch the experience of, if you start to know that life's messy and computer systems and these things are complicated in the healthcare system in our country, it's challenging. But ultimately, the end result is you do have insurance and you do get to have the surgery, and it's all got on the same day. Do we focus our energy on that? Or do we focus the next week and month retelling our friends about all the hardship and pain? It's like she would never say all this, I'm saying it. About what a pain that is. What are we going to spend our time and energy on? So the idea is that if I have perspective, I live in a country that has auto insurance, health insurance. We have auto insurance too, I think, in this country. But and that I do get to have the doctor I wanted and all that. That's pretty cool. And what did I really do except talk to people for a few days? We talk to people all the time, right? The only thing that makes that whole experience suffering is what? A mind thinking it should be different than it is. But we do it all the time, don't we? She just went through a whole other thing today. It was pretty funny to watch. Well, funny is an interesting word. I find it inspiring and a bit amusing. Went through all these things with our web hosting people in 2 days and conversations. You go back and then you call this other company and go, oh yeah, that's the problem, and they nail it in a minute. And you go, man, these people for 2 days. and you got it. And so our response is, cool, we got it fixed. Instead of going on and on about how it should have been different for a day, right? Because that's what's actually happening. Is it beneficial for me to spend my time, energy, resentment, frustration, and anger dwelling on something that has no existence in reality, which is that things should have been different than they were? Because that's not what happened. What actually happened was this, and if I can accept this, I can engage with this and skillfully keep responding and being patient and kind to whoever's in front of me and do my best. Me wanting it to be different won't change things, except breed resentment, anger, frustration, mental afflictions, karmic klesha in my mind. So coming back to here is if I start to realize that my mental and emotional suffering in life does not come from what's actually happening out there. It comes from what? It comes from how I'm perceiving and relating to it. It's on my end. It's not on your end. What matters is what I do. And if I take this a step further, it's empowering. It's empowering in the sense that there's no one else that can control they don't have control over what I do, mentally and emotionally, and how I respond and how I perceive. I do. What a gift. What a liberation. And so the situations in our life, they come and go. Some are challenging, some are wonderful, some are neutral, some are so-so, some are interesting, some are not so interesting. The events themselves and how I experience them are related, and they're related, sort of all this karmic ways, but also when we think about how I'm experiencing what is happening, the interchange that is really relevant is my perception of it, my understanding, whether I see it clearly or not. So if I can recall that the world that I'm experiencing and how I perceive it, if I'm perceiving it with mental afflictions arising, they're arising because of my previous actions. So if somebody's I'm experiencing a jerk, yelling at the jerk is not going to make the jerk just go away in my life. That's going to create more jerks in my life. It's just like torturing myself, sticking a fork in my eye some more. It's just like, I don't want to suffer, but I keep doing things to create more suffering. It's just, so if I get the dynamic, well, then I can work with it. Now I got something to work with. And I can start, instead of planting seeds that lead to anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration, more jerks, more negative experiences, I do that by unwholesome activity, and I do that out of misperception. On the other hand, whatever's arising, I can skillfully respond with the motivation of, the three sort of within the Pali Canon come from is renunciation, which is, renunciation is renouncing the delusion, that my mind's telling me that all that should be different and wouldn't bring me this happiness and all that stuff. Really renouncing those 8 worldly concerns and dedicating myself to, reality and goodwill and harmlessness. So if my motivations are to improve the situation for myself and others, it's not that I need to be a doormat. There's nothing compassionate or thoughtful about that. That's just more suffering. It's about responding to a way, making the calls I need to call, having the boundaries I need to have, but not because they're a bad or evil person. They're another human being, and I'm just dealing with, the boundaries. And I'm realizing that life is messy. I mean, that's the big core thing when I have noticed over the years is that people forget life is messy. They forget that I die. They forget that I get sick. They forget that the nature of being human is that your relationships will change and come and go. They forget that some days we're going to wake up and the government won't work because they decided to shut down. That one just blows me away, by the way. Though, side note, saw this post online little video. You know that big snowstorm they had in Washington, D.C., shut down things? The day after the snowstorm, or when they dug themselves out in the Capitol, in Congress, the only ones who showed up, including not just the politicians but the staff, were women. Not a single guy. The women were like way tougher. They show up the next day after the snowstorm, and they're working. Yeah. There's a little video on that. She's in there just saying, I'm just looking around here, and I noticed that the only one in here are women. Yeah, so at least they showed up. Took care of some business. So, let me see where I'm at here. So what can we do? All right. One thing that we can do to improve our life and instantly remove a lot of suffering is stop living in a delusional world that says things should be different than they are. And the sooner that we can accept things, I've just eliminated a lot of rumination, resentment, frustration in my life. So, and I can start being more mindful of how I respond to what's happening. There's these 5 things that lead to awakening. I'm really going right root sort of Polycanon stuff here. And these are just really good advice. Good advice, right? Things that we can do. So one is just remember that life's messy. You wake up, life's messy. Now, I'm doing it from a Buddhist point of view. Scott Peck's book, The Road Less Traveled, first sentence, life is difficult. It's right there. You're going to find it everywhere. It just is. It is. Life's messy. We forget it. And we somehow fight against the reality that life is messy. If we understand it's messy, we really get to enjoy the good times. And if I know that it's limited, I think about what's the purpose of my life. And that's been our message over the last few weeks, is to have a path. And that's where we're getting back to. I just wanted to come here to foundational stuff. Here's a path that will lead me to awakening, a path that can liberate me from suffering, a path that can make this life truly fruitful and liberate myself from all of this cyclic existence and truly be a benefit to all beings. All of us can do that. So we can have a path. We're probably not going to establish a path if we only dabble in it once in a while. Right? Thoreau would say, right? You don't make a path in the forest by walking there a few times. Make a deep physical path, you go there again and again. Likewise. To create a path, we need to imbue our mind with Dharma. We need to bring our mind back to the path. And so here's some things that can do that are just going to help you. This is just foundational, really good stuff. Good advice. One is have admirable friends. Admirable friends. Surround yourself with good company. And this has a more subtle point than we might think. Not just people that are funny and interesting and kind, but are there friends in our lives that take us away from our path? Are there friends in our life that want to drag us off, like, I'm going to go meditate. Why do you do that meditation stuff? That looks boring, man. I'm going to do this. Are they supportive of your practice? Are they supportive of your practice in terms of a path? Are they supportive of a meaningful life? Or are they trying to take you out to the bars every other night? Not that that's a bad thing for them, but is that supportive of the path that you want? So your environment has an impact on us, right? Most of the time with our friends and people and we're talking, what are we talking about? Are we in a sangha where we're talking about mental afflictions and misperception of reality and labeling and doing that? If I'm talking about that with people daily, that becomes my focus. Or do I surround myself with friends that talks about everything else and distraction and takes me further away from reality? Not very supportive. So I want to think about that. Do we have some friends that we can talk to more frequently or include in our life that are thoughtful, living a purposeful life, people that you admire, and promote a path, a spiritual path? Morality, virtue. Again, Buddhist thing is all of our pleasurable experience, all of our happiness comes from wholesome activity. So again, not rocket science. All happiness and good comes from wholesome activity. all unhappiness and suffering comes from unwholesome activity. It's not rocket science. If you want to be genuinely happy, have well-being, inner peace, and tranquility, it comes from doing things that are virtuous, that you feel good about. You do things you feel good about, you feel good. Okay? Different from doing things that make me feel good. That's a different thing. Doing things I feel good about versus doing things that make me feel good. Two different things. As a matter of fact, the pleasurable experience you get from things was a result of things you did earlier that you felt good about, virtuous activity. Things that are unvirtuous, we don't feel good about just on a gut level, but they also create the karmic imprints for unpleasurable experiences. So any unpleasurable experience, and I always do it's not really coffee tonight, it's just it's water. But if this were coffee, when I drink it and I have a delicious experience, the pleasure that I've received, where's the delicious, right? The delicious came from how I lived my life previously, provided me the delicious experience. Someone else may not like coffee. The delicious is not in the coffee, it's not in the water, it's not the thing. It's the interaction between my karmic imprints and phenomena. So if I keep doing wholesome things, I have more pleasurable experiences. The same person that I might find interesting, you might find as a jerk. Or I might find them as a jerk, you might find them interesting. We think there's a jerk and an interesting person. How we experience them is from how we've lived our life. Pleasurable, unpleasurable, neutral. Our experience of events is always on us and how we lived our life. So if I want a lot more pleasurable experiences, I just do wholesome activity. So the second thing here is the more and this goes to Aristotle, it goes on and on. I mean, every philosophy, every major thing, again and again, the more that we do that's virtuous, that we feel good, creates well-being. The third thing is making sure that we hear, it says here, hearing the Dharma. This also includes, reading the Dharma. But hearing the Dharma, there's also this sort of lung, a transmission, an imprint, a blessing to the mind. So teachings that, like I've received from my teachers, and in our tradition, they'll have them actually read a text. They'll read word for word the text, and that text gets, planted and blessed in our mind stream. So this is lineage. So a lot of times when you receive that, they'll cite it all the way back and how this has been passed down. But it plants really good seeds. And Dharma, there's the teaching of the Buddha, but Dharma also is the nature of reality itself. And so the more that we hear, that brings us back to how things are, the truth of the nature of reality, the path to awakening. The more that we have that in our lives, the more it's going to become familiar, and the more we'll be able to interact in the world in healthy and meaningful ways and stop mucking it up. Fourth one is effort, exertion. And in this sense, effort at this level is really, we would say in ours, more diligence, mindful diligence in a sense of abandoning unskillful qualities and cultivating skillful ones. So there's an effort. There's one thing about knowing what is good and unhealthy, and as we talked about, there's a whole nother in actually developing that. Developing habits that are meaningful, that are beneficial qualities like compassion, kindness, for these four immeasurables, equanimity, empathetic joy, that we can, patience, we have the 6 perfections too. There's all these qualities that we can cultivate, and there's some qualities that we want to let go of. And it takes an effort. If we don't put the effort in, what gets stronger? It just gets stronger. Our habits and tendencies get stronger. And in order to really cultivate things, we need to bring our mind to them. We need to be present in our life. And so this is where, we meditate, we develop the ability to attend to the moment that I'm in, to be aware of what I'm feeling, my motivations, what's going on out here. noticing my biases and my judgments, and being able to really respond in a way that's healthy and meaningful. And when we talk about mindfulness, it includes all of that. These days in a sort of watered down mindfulness, it's moment to moment awareness. But it's actually, mindfulness is an insight practice, a wisdom practice. It's a way of being present with a discerning and clear mind that's aware of unhealthy and healthy, and able to empower us to make healthy choices, cultivates healthy habits. And that's what we're talking here, this diligence, this mindful diligence of skillful and unskillful. And then the fifth thing that we can do is really start to become aware of impermanence. And this is an incredibly powerful practice. So our Mindful Life community, we send an email out every day, and we invite people to have a practice for that day, something to think about. And so impermanence will be one of those ones, where we'll notice, impermanence is not simply that I'm going to die. Impermanence is my feeling of sadness will come and go. My frustration will come and go. I don't need to react to it. Impermanence will know that my despair will come and go. Impermanence has layers of meaning. So when we look at insight, we start to understand that these days come and go, my feelings come and go, things and people change, and I don't have to get as bound up and identified and caught up with these things. And we create a lot of suffering in our lives simply trying to make things permanent that aren't permanent. We try to find stability in an unstable world, right? And the world's not that way. Tornadoes take care of houses. Windstorms come, rainstorms come, flooding happens. Impermanence, I can be as joyful and wonderful and the vacation of a lifetime, and 2 weeks later I can be miserable and depressed and upset and frustrated. And my problem is when I'm miserable, upset, and frustrated, I really think that's the way life is, and what do I do? How can I ever change? And I make a lot of poor decisions. So impermanence is to be aware of that all this phenomenon, our conditioned existence, is changing all the time. It comes and it goes. Thoughts come and go. Feelings come and go. Jobs come and go. Relationships come and go. Again and again. And if we start to notice that, I stop trying to preserve it. And I'm able to be freely involved with it. So all of these things here today that we're bringing up is really an attempt to point out two things. One is that the nature of the world that we live in, the more that we accept it, the less suffering you have. That's all. You're able to make healthier choices because you're making healthy choices based in reality. I believe, and I've said this, and sometimes I say things and I think, does that hold up? I like to check those out. Sometimes I say things and, a few years later I think, I don't think that held up. So far this has held up. Because people sometimes struggle with, spiritual life. Am I doing a spiritual life? Whether I'm Christian, whatever my religion is, am I turning it over to God? Am I engaging in spiritual life? What I have found, and again, this is me, this is not the wisdom of my teachers. So if it's fallible, it's me. That the reflection of my spiritual life is the ability to make healthy choices that are based in reality. And I think that fits if you're a Christian. I think that fits if you're Hindu. If I'm able to roll with what is and be able to make healthy choices based on these values and the way I want to live my life. If I'm able to make healthy choices, it's wisdom again, healthy choices, and do them based in reality, as things are. So it takes the mystery out of it. It really takes the mystery out of it. Whatever my belief system is, ultimately, it's what I do. Am I able to, based on my belief system, make healthy choices that are fundamentally based, accepting of what's happening in front of me? Then we're doing a spiritual life, I think. And so one was the idea that all of my mental and emotional suffering comes from not dealing with reality. The more I deal with reality, accept it as it is, I've automatically reduced suffering. That was point one. And point two is simply this. Unless you take the time to bring your mind back to reality, it will not go there alone. You actually need to do things like remember this. Every day you need to wake up. Okay, needs a strong word. I invite you to every day bring to mind when you wake up an accurate assessment of this thing we call life. And remember that here's a day that will never come again. Life's messy and uncertain. What matters is how I engage in it. And set an intention of what are the qualities you'd like to develop in your day. What are the qualities about yourself? What's a meaningful life to you? What's purposeful? And do your best to engage in this day that will never come again in that way. The more that you bring your mind back to how things are, the more they become a habit. You get to create new habits. These days, when I wake up out of bed, it's automatic that I'm stepping into a day that will never come again. That's how I stagger out of bed, literally. That thought arises as I put my feet. It's a new habit. And it wasn't the old habit. The old habit was hit snooze like 3 or 4 times. And I used to not be able to get up at all. Now I get 5:30, and when I put my feet on the floor without hitting snooze, first thought is, here's a day that will never come again. It's first thought. It's automatic. So if I can do this, and trust me, pure knucklehead here, you can as well. But it won't happen on its own. And the more that I don't bring my mind to reality, the more my mind makes up a nice little fantasy world where ponies fly and there's rainbows or something. How's that go?
Rainbows, unicorns, and puppies or something?
Yeah. Filled with that. Which may exist. I don't know. There was a guy at a group that we had the other night say. So, where I don't get sick, where everybody likes me, where my relationships are untroubled, and we just understand how we are with each other all the time. And my car starts whenever I want it to. Yeah. Where I don't get sick and I stay healthy and I don't get weaker as I get older. And where people treat me kindly and fairly all the time. And hospital authorizations are like magic. My mind will tell that story quick, won't it? Look at how we perceive how the world should be. And then take a look. And if we put it into perspective, what you'll find is a lot of gratitude. Out of the 7 billion humans in there, not even thinking about animals and all the other types of beings that are suffering, the quality of life that we have and the rare and precious human rebirth that you have is far above almost all of them. So at any given time, we have, what do they call them, first world problems that we get so worked up over as we're in traffic, in our car with heating and air conditioning and heated seats. It's really troubling. It's really troubling. Because if that doesn't really illustrate how things don't create our problems, it's our mind. And we get acclimated to things like that. So this week, I really wanted to just take a little time to invite you to call to mind and establish a daily habit in the morning. We call it 4 thoughts that turn your mind to Dharma, which is not this teaching specifically, But this is called, and you can look them up, called 5 Daily Recollections, or the 5 Recollections. There's 5 things that lead to awakening. Though I'm more trained in Tibetan Buddhism, Mahayana practice, this is just right from the basic Theravada and the Pali Canon. Really solid material of really good advice from the Buddha on how to remove suffering. And it's applicable whether or not you believe in it. I mean, that's the beautiful thing. It just makes sense, right? Life's messy. If I understand that, I'm not going to be so shocked when it shows up. My mental and emotional suffering comes from me wanting things to be different than they are. Well, stop doing that and you'll suffer less, right? It's easier said than done, and it takes practice. And part of this at the end is the awareness of impermanence, which is also reflective of my mental and emotional suffering will go away, right? We've all had it. We've had tragic, unbearable emotional pain, and it went away. We've had incredible joy, wonder, and happiness. It went away. Things change. What sticks with us again and again and again is simple. How I lived my life. And the things that I did that I felt really good about, guess what? I still have joy today when I think about them. When I do things I feel good about, I look in the mirror. I have resiliency, a sense of inner peace and well-being. Greeks call it eudaimonia, pleasure, this inner flourishing. Buddhists, this sort of sense of well-being. We call it genuine happiness that underlies and pervades all of my other experiences. So even when emotions come and go, even when anxiety arises, even when fear and depression arise, within that is a sense of well-being. It says it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And that comes from living a meaningful life. A life that has purpose, a life that has a path. If we remember that, it brings us back to what are my actions, where are the seeds I'm watering? Am I watering seeds of impatience, intolerance, judgment, blah, blah, blah? Am I watering seeds that keeps telling me and reinforces the idea that you are responsible for my suffering? Or am I watering the seeds that bring up some reality? It says, the source of my mental and emotional suffering comes from here, not there. Once you start watering those seeds, now you're empowered to change your whole experience and to really, actually, ultimately vanquish all suffering. It's about just living in the world that actually exists instead of the one we want to make up. All right. Boom. So, that's that. We'll do a little dedication. It's pretty easy, right? You got that? Okay. So, always more easily said than done, and that's why at the start I said, just studying this doesn't really, doesn't make the change. What makes the change is doing it. There's 3 wisdoms: hearing the teaching, contemplating the teaching, meditating on the teaching, and then ultimately engaging in the teaching. That's how it really kicks. So, all right. Well, let's do our little dedication. Little, and nothing little about it. We're going to dedicate this merit for the benefit of all beings. Let us dedicate the virtue and wisdom that we have accumulated here today and throughout our lives, both individually and collectively. We dedicate this for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be free of suffering and find lasting happiness. And may we be able to use the virtue and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lives to purify our own minds, to truly achieve our own enlightenment and be of benefit to all beings. Thank you all so much. A joy and an honor to be with you. May be well, be happy, and try to stay out of trouble. And try to live in reality.